So we talk about advocacy, we talk about social equity, we talk about a playing field of access. You know, we'll talk about equality in a lot of different ways. For me, it's about access. You know, they talk about, well, handouts and you know, you have all these different sides of a debate to me that isn't the real issue. You know, we're driven so much by rhetoric. You know, they make a lot of money off of us being divisive and arguing with each other, of course, you know, and we enable that. They'll throw something out, they'll throw some red meat out there, as my friend Pete will say, and we'll see where it goes. Well, for me, the equality issue, particularly around things like cannabis, which we know, so you know, there's I say a lot that there's no more reason to debate this issue. And then I had somebody very much smarter than me tell me, well, as an advocate, you still need to educate. So the debate rages on. But you know, one of the things that has happened, of course, is that like many parts of our society, a disproportionate amount of negative impact from prohibition has happened to the poor and to Black and brown and red and people of color, more so than any other aspect of society. Now, we know that Schedule I was done to suppress the civil rights movement and the anti-war movement. We know it. I mean, these things are factual. These information has been released to us so we could see it, unfortunately. You know, the declassified documents, we know these things have happened. So when you talk about advocacy and you talk about moving to change, particularly in an industry that is creating billions and billions of dollars of revenue, one of the things that needs to be remembered is the people who are negatively impacted because of these oppressive nature of prohibition need to be allowed to have access. God, that's horrible. They need to have access. They need to have the tools to have access. You know, so this is an important part of the big picture. You know, when you have, it's the same thing with the prisoners. You know, you saw Craig Cecil earlier. You know, this is somebody who was negatively impacted by prohibition, victimless crime. Nobody was injured. Nothing happened. I wouldn't care how much cannabis he had on him. The point is that he was negatively impacted by a prohibition which should have never happened, still should not be happening. So when you're talking about advocacy and when you're talking about the industry, people like Craig and anybody else who has been negatively impacted should be first on the list, or first, second, whatever, but they need to be on the list to get access, to be able to be part of this industry. And so we heard conversations earlier about reparation around slavery and things like that. This is no different. So I say this as a preamble because my next guest does so much work in this area and has for a very long time, both as a victim of prohibition and now as a fierce advocate, lobbyist, writer of legislation, everyday advocate. And I'm so happy that she's joining us. I had the pleasure, of course, again, of meeting her in person years ago, interviewing her, getting to know the platform and what she's all about. And I've paid attention because she's somebody you need to pay attention to without question. And she's one of my favorite people in the industry as far as advocacy is concerned, without question, because, you know, advocacy is hard. Activism is hard, but it's easier for those who have been negatively impacted by prohibition at some time in their life. And it's like, really, okay, you expect me to go away after what you did to me? Well, Larisa is the walk and the talk and all of it as far as an advocate is concerned. I'm so happy that you're here, Larisa. Larisa Bolivar, everybody. I'm going to get out the way and I'm going to hand it to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Bobby. Thank you for that introduction. Hi, everyone. Social equity, social justice has been my foundation of my platform in the cannabis movement and now industry For 20 years now. I got involved in 2001 and had one of the first dispensaries in the state pre-regulations. I am Latina, Native American, and white, and half my family's Black. My mom was adopted, my white mom. So I come from a very diverse background and was pretty much against the drug war even since high school when I started consuming cannabis. And so I made this a focus of my cannabis career. My master's thesis, which I completed in 2016 and wrote it during 2014 and 2015, was enduring racial disparity after cannabis legalization, kind of ringing the alarms on the disparity that really you just had to look at a picture to see. And so with that formalized, I then just ran, wherever I could, trying to get attention for the issue. Joined up with a lady named Bonita Money and co-founded with a group of people the National Diversity Inclusion Cannabis Alliance. I've since resigned from the board since winning them a $650,000 grant from the governor's office in California. And I still help them and still advise them, but I needed to really focus here on Colorado because I saw the conversation was picking up speed, and even found myself not being completely included in these conversations. I myself was completely harmed by the drug war, just completely harassed by the police, raided, never charged, but constantly raided. I had to dissolve my business, and there's actually no Native American owners in the space now. So that's in here in Colorado, a study just formed. So I actually hired a lobbyist, a white lobbyist a Republican, who really hates the injustice in cannabis and in all industry. Sometimes we do have unlikely allies. This issue is actually seen as a free market issue. I myself am a liberal, and social justice is my mantle, but cannabis and other markets have been restricted, and there are people who really feel like opening up those restrictions and teaching people how to be owners and managers and develop sustainable economic stability is good for the economy, and that's true free market, not trying to control people. And so in Colorado just last week, a bill that Cindy Sovine, my lobbyist, found sponsorship for, and we wrote language for, and the language that was also adopted and added and amended into it was also language that was originally pulled from my thesis. For example, I wrote in my thesis that we should have grant money and loans available from marijuana revenues for programs, which is now picking up speed and is now in our law. We define social equity to make it broad because people like myself, who was rated under civil asset forfeiture, they took everything, destroyed my life. I literally had to start over with $500 and came back to Colorado from DC, where I was born. And I went back home, restarted my life, came back in 2013, found myself excluded, looked around and didn't see anybody that remotely matched anybody that I grew up with that were impacted by the drug war. I just saw very wealthy men, white men in suits, and that definitely didn't represent the demographic of the Black market. And eventually I founded the Cannabis Consumers Coalition, and I wanted to, through that, our mission is to give consumers a voice in policy and in industry, but then to also create an ethical cannabis industry. And the reason why I feel like this is important is because essentially this whole lottery license and licensing process with these suitability requirements that ultimately restricted people of color from joining the industry, these suitability requirements, I couldn't even participate in the industry that I'm a recognized trailblazer for, and I literally have artifacts submitted to the Colorado History Museum. It's very insane. Now social equity is a hot topic because it makes money, which is great. I mean, yeah, that's great. I'm glad that people are incentivized to pursue this just cause. But at the same time, they're pushing people like myself aside to get ahead of that. And so that's why I hired a lobbyist. That's why I worked very hard on this. I created a roadmap for success. This is what helped me win this grant, and Indica works with it currently. It's not an uncommon model, and I created this for cannabis, but I wanted to also, share it with y'all. It doesn't have to be, it's just, it can be, applied to any industry. I need to share screen, so bear with me because I'm not the most, oh, it's disabled. Can you let me share screen? There we go. Okay, so where's my, here we go. Let's go here. There. So, social equity roadmap to success. Creating long-lasting management and owner opportunities in cannabis via social equity programs. I always stress that this is about ownership and management. Yes, we need to diversify the workforce. Absolutely, it's important. But this is about economic security and long-lasting economic development and workforce development. And we need leaders that come from our communities, that can help manage people from those communities, and consumers need to also shop at places that are representative of them. Which reminds me, the other point with the Consumer Coalition is that I forgot to make, that I wanted to make in the beginning, that I think is very critical in this whole conversation, is that the unregulated market, known as the black market, which is a racist term, was $1 billion market, and that was the incentive for rich white people to come in and regulate it and take it out of everybody's hands. So they essentially took our customers, including mine. I helped shepherd the first 2,000 patients through the registry, and I was a big target of theirs by law enforcement and thieves. So essentially they stole our market. And I mean, I have family from the hood, and when you do that in the hood, the repercussions are a lot more severe. And so we had to figure out ways legally and peacefully, although aggressively, pursue social equity. So anyhow, that's why we need management ownership opportunities. And I'm not for even franchising. I'm for pure ownership, like all the money gets put back into the communities. I'm sure most of y'all know what social equity is. I really like this image here. It's a very popular one. I look at it as something that has always been my policy objective. I have a master's in public policy. I have a love-hate relationship with policy work because it's very hard and emotional. But for me, I like to look out for the greatest good for the greatest amount of people, and that's the objective of social equity. We're looking to provide people tools for success. Those tools are very broad, and they're particular in communities of color based on our experiences, and I'll get more to that later. As we know, social equity is not equality. Unfortunately, we're not all born equal, and I love this image because I myself am short, so I can completely relate to this image. And we're trying to get it to where we can all have the same voice, we can all have the same tools, we all have the same access to education, the same access to funding and loans, the things that we've been systematically shut from. Social equity is not just a cannabis related effort. It is also something that is a national and local government goals. There's a big push because this is also a diversity issue and an affirmative action issue. Governments are finding that they themselves aren't very equitable in their management practices, and so they're under pressure to change, and that's also bleeding into industry. And I work with the Colorado Black Roundtable, which is a group of entrepreneurs that are working to advance causes for people of color and the Black community. And then, so this is also a community effort. And then there are efforts in cannabis. California has basically taken the lead. I don't want to get too much into details because I don't have too much time of each state. And there's other states on here that are also including social equity programs. But the ones that I feel like are the most robust would be California, Massachusetts, Illinois, and now Colorado. This bill that we just passed, House Bill 2014-24, social equity in regulated cannabis businesses, was very critical, because had we not passed this bill, and we all had to work together, we had to express a lot of urgency, and we were very lucky to get bipartisan support on this issue. So we had both Democratic and Republican support, which was amazing. but I feel like Colorado now is positioned to actually take a lead in this. And I'm working with all kinds of leaders, city officials, government officials, even the governor's office, to ensure that we do roll out a program that we can all be proud of, and create a good legacy and maintain our leadership position. Because quite honestly, I think we slipped a little bit on that, when, you know, we forgot to include social equity in the beginning, which, by the way, was very much spoken about through the Denver 420 rally, which I used to organize with and write their press releases. A lot of people in Colorado policymaking are saying that this was not really an important issue or brought up or whatever because of polls, or, you know, nobody mentioned it, but that's not true. But, you know, I don't want to, this isn't about that. I just wanted to, you know, stress that we are behind the curve, and we're going to have to push really hard, and we're going to need a lot of community engagement here in Colorado to push this through. Um, so with that said, the steps to achieving social equity, it's very important to follow these steps, because it's not just, you know, passing a law and a business saying, oh yeah, you know, I'll take in you know, a candidate and help them become a business owner and then graduate them. It's literally a very concerted effort. A lot of the communities we're reaching out to don't have the same methods of communication, access to computers, and if they do, internet, phones. You know, this isn't, you know, my whole thing is, just because you're broke and poor doesn't mean you're stupid and you know, you can't be educated. We all fall on hard times. Sometimes it's very hard for us to find those resources. So outreach has been something that I learned through Indica and the team there, and they're very good at outreach. Is, you know, just extremely important. And I'll get into detail of all of these steps on each of these slides. Assessment, that includes skills and social assessment. Training is very important. Internship and job placement, technical support for licensing, incubation, and ongoing support. This is something that we can't just, you know, hand someone, you know, put them through a process and then say, okay, bye. This is a long-term commitment. So outreach is very involved. And again, I mentioned it's, you know, I feel like it's one of the most important steps. I've seen that it's been, and by practice myself, it's been most accomplished by expungement clinics and record sealing clinics. In Colorado, we do more technically record sealing clinics, and the bill that we just passed also expanded pardon capabilities for the governor's office for cannabis, people with cannabis convictions. You know, we still have to push more and a little bit harder, but, you know, sometimes these are a step-by-step case. But however you can reach out, this is good. Building relationships with community leaders. Not, you know, and sometimes that could be, you know, people that some folks might find unsavory, former gang leaders, former prisoners. But, you know, that just because, you know, any one of us have gotten in trouble before doesn't mean we're bad people either. It just means that, you know, we're a byproduct of the environment that, you know, we were raised in, unfortunately. So reaching out to those community members who have turned their lives around, they tend to have a big following in their communities. And so that's really important. And then also reaching out to other social workers and other community organizations, social work organizations, I should say, churches, re-entry programs and job training programs. A lot of times they're one and the same, but either way, those are really great methods of reaching out to community members that could benefit from social equity programs. Assessment, I would say, is almost equally as important, because we're working with at-risk community members, and so we need to determine what their needs are and what their skills are and what their abilities are. So on the professional side, everything that you basically need to either work as a manager, as an owner, and through the whole chain of the company. And then social needs, sometimes people can't make it to their designation or where training is located. Clothing, childcare, financial situation, dietary needs, so food banks, those things, and of course mental health and trauma, because it's known that most people coming from communities that have been harmed from the drug war struggle with PTSD. Training, again, just as important. Um, Training should be related to assessment of goals and skills. So if they want to be a manager, then of course should be management training and ownership training. They often coincide. So those that are building training programs will find, you know, that there's a lot of intersect. And cross training, which I really recommend, in which I should have put a bullet point on here, which I will add. But cross training is really important for a variety of reasons. It's just really nice to have a bunch of skill sets, but then also compliance is related, 100% related to survivability in the cannabis space and really in all regulated spaces. So, you know, really just having that hands-on training in every aspect of the business will help you understand that. And then on the job and internship programs, so that, you know, again, getting that hands-on training. Trade schools, there's a variety of cannabis related trade schools that offer training and perhaps discounted certificates. I know I myself and the group that I work with, we offer training as well. Future managers and owners should have training in all facets of running a licensed cannabis business. I mentioned that before. And when I say all aspects, I mean all aspects. If I need to add delivery on here, but delivery, you know, you got to drive that car or that truck and learn how to do it in a compliant manner. There's a lot of moving parts with that, a lot of paperwork. Reception duties, there's a lot of compliance that in that area, whether it's a cultivation or really any licensed facility, because you have to check people in, you have to make sure that they have a badge or you give them a visitor's badge, and you know, it's very, very regulated. The whole cultivation life cycle, equipment maintenance, security, these things are very important. Regulatory language and procedures, legalese, it's annoying, but it's so important. Cannabis, a compliance violation can result in, you know, $100,000 fine, and I've seen that shut down small businesses, which would, you know, be the majority of social equity licensees. Compliance management, most important, should throw that to the top, but you know, you just can't be compliant enough. That's also my background in cannabis has been I worked for iComply, and then I actually still work alongside them, and we do compliance training through my group. Facilities management, I've had a cultivation and a dispensary. Anything can go wrong, and it will. And then human resources, which is really important, and I'll get to that in a slide later, but especially if you're running a social equity business. And I recommend trauma-informed policies, so that would be driven through a human resources department. Management, internship and job placements, that would require a relationship with existing cannabis businesses, so I recommend that folks build those relationships and you know, find other businesses that are owned by people of color, and there's also other allies that are wanting to help as well. And I have my phone number and email out here. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I can help, you know, shepherd folks into the right, you know, area. They must be placed on fast track towards management. That should be measurable, and you know, hands-on. It, you know, it can't be, you know, trimming or bud tending, you know, or some other $15 an hour job for 10 years. It has to be like 1 month this, 1 month that. It's, some of this stuff is not rocket science, you know, but like compliance, that's going to probably take 6 months or so. And then of course, hands-on mentorship and technical assistance. This requires a lot of that. I have folks that I work with that I literally handhold, and you know, which I love that relationship. I'm, you know, getting into my 40s, and a lot of these are millennials, and it's kind of like a great relationship. And but you know, it's very much needed, a lot of coaching, a lot of encouragement along the way, and helping people find resources. Pathways to ownership, licensing assistance, incubator programs, financial assistance. These are things that are very needed to help facilitate ownership. Licensing is very expensive, and a lot of the expense is in the writing. You can expect to pay a team of writers $100,000 or more to write an entire application from scratch. That's a lot of money. And then the technical expertise in writing that, because it's a technical document. It's similar to an RFP or an RFQ, any of those processes with the government, because essentially you're getting permission from the government to get that license. um Incubator programs, a lot of businesses should be open to helping folks. And an incubator program literally looks like um you're incubating a baby, in the sense that you're inviting a business into your own business, and you're helping them with tools that they would otherwise not have access to, financial reasons, or resources, just not knowing the people, attorneys, accountants, just marketing, all these different resources that can be shared. And for businesses who say, why me, why should I do that? Well, first of all, I made that point about people taking customers from us, so it's only fair. But capitalism sometimes doesn't leave room for fairness. But if we want it to work, that is going to have to be a part of it. And so, and also, we're moving into an era of social responsibility. People really want to be good businesses. We're looking at what happens when you have bad business. The whole world is, getting ready to erupt in a revolution if we don't fix it. So ways to fix that: being a socially responsible company, giving back to the communities that helped make your dream possible. A whole team of people, whole generations of people dug these wells that other people are drinking from now. And I took that term from John Bailey with the Colorado Black Roundtable, because I couldn't find a better analogy for what we're dealing with. Financial assistance, grants and loans from cannabis and hemp revenues. This is something that I mentioned earlier, that I've been, that I recommended in my thesis, and that I've been working on and promoting every chance I get. Anybody who will listen gets that message from me. Equipment financing discounts and assistance programs, extraction equipment that costs up to 100,000, 200,000, $1 million. It's depends on the facility and the market share you're trying to capture and what your needs are. And then of course the people that can help you figure out the assistance and how to go after it. And I do have access to business mentors as well, a whole plethora of them. And this includes financial assistance and helping businesses be prepared, how to prepare themselves for investors. And this is done through money that they received via grant. So I'm happy to provide that information for folks who reach out to me after this conference or meeting, or whatever we call these things now. And real estate. Real estate's another very major expense in our space, in any space now, really, and especially in cities. So real estate assistance, such as rent to own and lower rents, I've seen be very effective. Co-locations, if you build a wall, I mean, that I don't want to get too much into issues that would be related to zoning and stuff and complicated, but these right here would be a very simple, fast way to help create a more equitable industry. This right here.
Town halls, Larisa.
Town halls, thanks. Town halls. So, I also have a background in psychology. I have a degree in psychology, and I actually, did a little bit of social work myself in the cannabis space. Where you just actually gave me credit for that, which was kind of cool. But I myself have PTSD. I helped get PTSD added onto the registry here in Colorado, and that was a process that I actually started, not help, but actually started myself in 2006. It took us until 2017. But you cannot have a social equity program without being very cognizant and compassionate towards the people that you work with. So obviously I'd mentioned earlier, and we all know this, that trauma is very common in I say our communities, I'm speaking for my communities, but communities harmed by war on drugs and poverty, the constant stress, the constant unknowns, these are things that bleed into your adulthood. Here I am, very successful now, and I worry about money all the time. And my significant other has to be like, it's okay, everything's okay. And I'm like, it's just something that we struggle with. And so, this is why I feel like it's so important, again, for, people from our communities have control of this dialogue. And I don't mean even people of color who are jumping in and saying, hey, you know, this is my thing too. I'm a person of color. I want people who are harmed by the drug war to have those harms repaired. There are a lot of people jumping in who want to make money as consultants. I do consulting in this space. That's not why I do this. My whole record has been social justice. I don't even advertise my consulting outside of speaking engagements. I don't send ads out or anything because I have a products company that I have investors that I'm lining up for. I'm very busy on that end, and I really love doing that. And I'm very picky on who I work with, and I work with a lot of social equity candidates. I even hire um, uh, folks from marginalized community members in my own. This is what I've learned in doing so, and I've learned that having trauma informed policies is really important, and training your staff. Not, I have on here to recognize triggers, but also, just to be compassionate and patient. Working with people with trauma can sometimes be a little frustrating. When I'm triggered, I do strange things, like I open up the refrigerator and I'll stare at it for 5 minutes, and not because I'm looking for food, just because I'm pausing out, thinking, trying to compose myself.
Well,
But
Larissa,
yes.
can you give me a closing statement? We are running a little long.
Yes,
And
I actually, and this is actually my next slide is conclusion.
oh, look at that. See?
Look at
I like
that.
it. I like it.
I'm a nerd. I had to get through my master's and working full time. So I
You're a
learned how to
good
time
nerd.
myself
I
really
don't think there's
well.
a bad nerd. Yes,
Yeah,
you're a marvelous nerd.
thank you. So, as I mentioned, the social equity program has to be a very careful adaptation to the steps that I mentioned to be successful. It requires ongoing technical support, discounted services, ongoing mentorship. All of this stuff is critical to success. I am available for anything. I do offer first free hour consultations for social equity candidates, extremely discounted rates. I also do a lot of advocacy work. So if you have issues, just let me know. I like to fight. So